welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor of Smart Publishing and your host for the show. And today is another solo episode. I promise I'm going to have another guest on soon, but I've had a lot of different content that I've been wanting to share. And this episode is a follow-up to last week's episode that I promised I would record, all about book. I've had quite a few people ask me to record an episode about book length and to talk about it a little bit more. And so here we are. I've jotted down some notes about what I want to talk about. And I think the most logical place to start in this discussion is, why are we even talking about book length? Where does that come from? And what is actually important when we're thinking about book length? So the reason we're even talking about book length at all, and that's in response to the question, how long should my book be, is because of traditional publishing. We've all heard things out there about minimum word counts for a book. So how many words is my book supposed to be? That's a question I get a lot as well. And here's the cool thing. When you're in the world of independent and self-publishing, it's as long as it needs to be. That's my short answer, but I'll get to that in just a second. Why does traditional publishing have word count requirements? The reason for that is they're trying to get an ROI. That's the reason, because they have a lot of data that shows the thickness of a book in relation to the price someone is willing to pay for it. So for them to be able to mark a hardcover book at $35, let's just say, because they've calculated that that's what they need to charge in order to get a return on it, it has to be a certain thickness. That's it right there. That's where all of this actually stems from. And now, I've said this in a previous podcast episode, think about in terms of being the reader. When you've read a book that had a ton of fluff and a ton of filler, and you're sitting there reading through pages and you're like, wait, what did I just read? Or I feel like the author is just talking in circles. They've already said that. That's where that comes from. That is coming from people trying to hit minimum word count. So while it may sell books, it does not necessarily end up with the best reader experience. So now let's go back to what I said just a second ago. And that is how long your book should be. When somebody asks me that question, as long as it needs to be. As long as it needs to be to provide value, to be clear, and to provide a great reader experience. As long as it needs to be. Now, there is one big factor that you may want to think about when it comes to the length of your book. And I don't go by word count. I go by page count, because pages can be full of more than just words, like diagrams and journaling sections and tables and charts and much more value added content versus just throwing more words, which are pretty teeny tiny in relation to images on the page, right? So what you may want to think about when it comes to how long your book should be, besides just the reader experience, is if you want a readable spine on it. So if you're looking at YouTube, or if this made it into the teasers or something, I'm holding up a book right now that is 167 pages. I think it's around 197 pages long, and it's got a nice thick spine on it with some big bold text, and it's easy to read when it's sitting on a bookshelf somewhere. And that is typically what I will think about more, because if your book ends up not having a spine on it, it's not going to have a real book feel to it when you're looking at it, unless it's like a children's book. Most nonfiction books that are written for adults we anticipate them having a spine. We anticipate them looking like a book's book. Now, if you go into Amazon KDP, they will tell you the minimum page count is 76 pages. That will be like the most teeny tiny words I've ever seen on a spine, because honestly, the least amount of pages I've ever done was 97 pages, and the font had to be fairly small, but it wasn't so small that it wasn't readable. It was a good readable text. So yeah, sure. I guess that you could put some really teeny tiny font on a book that has 76 pages on it, but it's probably not going to be very legible, and it's probably going to be very teeny tiny. So what I encourage people is to try to hit at least somewhere around 100 pages. If you hit somewhere around 100 pages in your book, then you're going to be good. You're going to have a nice readable spine, and it's going to look like a book's book. So, what does this look like when you're actually writing your book? Now, there are two ways you can write your book. You can sit down and you can put your fingers on the keyboard and you can write in the traditional sense. That's what I prefer to do. That's what some of our authors prefer to do. That's what a lot of people don't prefer to do, though. So if you do not want to be typing away, then you could do audio transcription. And audio transcription is another way to write your book. You just go into a Zoom or a voice memo, something that records your audio, and we transcribe it. And now all of a sudden it's on a Word document and it can be edited. So that's another way to do it that feels a lot less laborious for most people. So let's talk about if you are writing in the traditional sense, you're going to need somewhere around 60 to 65 pages in Microsoft Word for a 6x9 trim book, which is the most popular size of book. That's going to end up being somewhere around 100 pages in length because of formatting, size, all those different things. Now, if you're coming in somewhere around 50, that's okay. We just need to figure out another content added strategy beyond just blowing up word count to get your page count built out. We can have workbook sections to your book with journaling pages that follow. Not too many journaling pages, though, just, enough. We don't want to have so much that the reader feels like they're not getting true value and you just threw a bunch of blank pages in there. Also, Amazon doesn't like stuff with a lot of blank repeat pages because it considers it low content, and they're cracking down on low content books because it doesn't provide a great reader experience for the exact reason I just specified. We can throw in diagrams, images, things that enhance the reading experience and also result in building out page count. So anywhere, less than 50 pages, it's going to be really hard to do that. But most chapters that I see turned in to me end up being about 3 to 6 pages in length when someone is hand typing them. Now, here's where audio transcription comes in. If you are recording to audio, if you do about, let's just say 5 minutes worth, 5.5 minutes of audio transcription, that's going to result in about 2 pages in a Microsoft Word file when it's transcribed. Now let's start increasing that. If you double that or triple that and go from 5 to 15, now all of a sudden you've got about 6 to 8 pages in there. Now let's say that you go all the way into 40. 40 minutes is the longest audio transcription that I've ever done for an author. That ends up somewhere around 12 to 13 pages. So if you can talk, in which case I encourage everybody to write a book about something they can talk about at length all day anyways, then if you can talk, you're golden, because you're going to be able to, very quickly, faster than typing, get your content out into the page in a pretty good, sized manuscript. So I talk a lot about all you need is 1 hour a week, because I wrote the book, The 1 Hour Author, A Simple Guide to Writing and Publishing on a Busy Schedule. But if you're recording, gosh, technically you actually need less, because like I just said, that 40 minutes equates into a really sizable chapter at about 12 to 13 pages. Once it's edited, of course, it can end up different, but if there's not a lot of fluff and filler in it, and there's really good value-added content in it, it might end up around the same once edited. So that's what it looks like if you type it out. And that's what it looks like if you record for transcription. And of course, I also already provided a lot of value added ways to build out page count. So remember, diagrams, charts, photos, images, workbook sections, key takeaways, journaling areas with reflection questions, creativity, and sky is the limit on those. They just need to enhance the book for the reader so that the reader is still getting a great reading experience out. So there you have it. In a nutshell, that's how we really want to think about how long your book should be. So at the end of the day, remember, your book should be as long as it needs to be to provide a great reader experience. And if you want to make sure that your book has a nice readable spine on it, we need to get it to at least somewhere around 100 pages in its final formatted version, which translates to about, anywhere between 60 to 65 pages minimum in a Microsoft Word document before it goes through the interior design process and the editing. So thank you for listening to this episode. As always, if you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review. That would be wonderful. Share this with anybody who you know is writing a book, has written a book, or wants to write a book. Look me up on Facebook, Renée Lautermilch. Pretty easy to find me. I'm pretty sure I'm the only person in the world with that name, so not a lot of other Renée Lautermilchs come up. I'm the only one. And as always, keep writing your story because the world needs your voice.